A church bell ringing in the dark, rung by hand, in panic at 3 in the morning. A family climbing into the attic as black water swallows the staircase behind them. A radio announcer reading out a storm warning to a station that is about to switch itself off for the night. Welcome to the southwest of the Netherlands. It's Saturday, January 31st, 1953. By Monday morning, this region will be the site of the deadliest natural disaster in modern Dutch history. A catastrophe so traumatic that 70 years later, the Dutch still call it simply the disaster. But this isn't a story about bad weather, because here's the uncomfortable math. The storm was forecast. The warning was issued. The dikes were known, on paper, in official reports, to be too low. And the one engineer who had spent years shouting about it had the solution already drawn up in his desk drawer. Nobody listened. 1,836 people paid for that with their lives. And the strangest part? The sea didn't win. What the Dutch built afterwards now stands alongside the Panama Canal on the list of wonders of the modern world. And it's the reason this country still exists. By the end of this video, you'll understand how one winter night turned the Netherlands into the most flood-protected nation on Earth, and what happens when wind, water, neglect, and terrible timing all collide on a single Saturday night. First, the basics. The Netherlands is a country that, by any reasonable logic, shouldn't exist. Roughly a quarter of it sits below sea level. Around 60% would flood regularly if humans stopped intervening. For centuries, the only thing standing between millions of people and the North Sea has been a network of dikes, earth walls, some of them medieval. And in 1953, those dikes were tired. The Netherlands was 8 years out of Nazi occupation, pouring every guilder into reconstruction, houses, factories, the port of Rotterdam. Dike maintenance could wait. Government engineers knew the truth. One of them, a Rijkswaterstaat engineer named Johan van Veen, had warned for years that the sea defenses were dangerously low. He warned so often, so insistently, that he became known as Dr. Cassandra. After the prophet nobody believes. Remember him. He'll be back. Then, the sea moved. On Friday, January 30th, a deep low-pressure system slides past Scotland and turns south, pushing a wall of water down the North Sea like a piston. And it arrives at the worst conceivable moment, springtide, when the pull of sun and moon makes high water higher than normal. Storm surge, stacked on springtide, aimed at a delta of aging dikes. Saturday evening, the Dutch Weather Service issues its most serious alert: dangerous high water. The words actually go out over the radio. And then, this is the part that still makes Dutch people shiver. The national radio does what it does every single night. At midnight, it stops broadcasting, goes silent. There is no emergency system, no sirens. It's Saturday night, so the Dike Warden's episodes are closed. Telegrams sit unread. And in 1953, almost nobody in a Zeeland village owns a telephone. So the country goes to sleep. Just after 3 in the morning, the water arrives. At Vlissingen, the tide gauge records 4.55 meters above normal sea level, the highest ever measured in the Netherlands. The dikes don't fail in one place. They fail in more than 150 places, almost simultaneously, across Zeeland, the South Holland Islands, and Western Brabant. What happens next happens in the dark. The water doesn't creep in. It detonates through the breaches, flattening the houses closest to the dikes before anyone wakes. Survivors describe one sound cutting through the storm: church bells, rung by hand, by whoever reached them first. Families wade to staircases, then attics, then, with axes if they had them, through the roof itself. In the village of Udatong, 305 people die. Entire family lines end in a single night. The disaster wasn't over. Around midday on Sunday, when survivors thought they'd made it, the next high tide rolled in through the open breaches and slammed into houses that had been soaking for 12 hours. Weakened walls collapsed, with families still on the roofs. For many victims, the second tide, not the first, was the killer. And those who held on faced February nights in soaked clothes, with no rescue in sight. The cold took people who had survived everything else. Now, hold on, because while the South was drowning, the true nightmare scenario was unfolding further north, and it's a story that sounds invented. Behind one dike on the Hollands IJssel River, the Schielands Hoge Zeedijk, lies the deep, low heart of the country, the region around Rotterdam and The Hague. 3 million people, much of it several meters below sea level. That night, the dike begins to fail. If it goes, 1953 stops being a regional disaster and becomes the end of the Netherlands as a functioning state. A local mayor makes a decision with no precedent and no permission. He requisitions a river barge, De Twee Gebroeders, the two brothers, and asks its skipper, Adi Ewegroen, to steer his own ship into the collapsing dike, to use it as a cork. Ewegroen agrees. He takes a rowboat in tow, in case it all goes wrong, and swings the barge into the gap. It holds. Volunteers pile sandbags around the hull through the night. One ship, one skipper, one improvised decision. And 3 million people never find out how close it came. But step back for a second, because daylight reveals the scale. Around 200,000 hectares, 9% of Dutch farmland, is now sea. Tens of thousands of animals have drowned. More than 70,000 people need evacuating from a water world with no electricity, no phones, no roads. The state is effectively blind. For days, the most reliable communication network in the disaster zone is a patched-together web of amateur radio hobbyists. Then, the world shows up. Helicopters, machines many Zeeland farmers have never seen in their lives, some flown in by American crews, start plucking families off rooftops in one of the first large-scale helicopter rescue operations in history. Donations pour in under a slogan the whole country knows by heart: wallets open, dikes closed. And in November 1953, engineers seal the final breach at Overkerk using giant concrete caissons left over from D-Day, the same type that built the Allied invasion harbors in Normandy. The war's leftovers, plugging the sea. The numbers first, then the reckoning. 1,836 dead in the Netherlands. More than 300 in England, where the same surge drowned coastal towns. A ferry lost at sea. All told, the storm killed over 2,500 people in one weekend. In peacetime, in modern industrialized Western Europe. So the country reached for an answer and discovered it was already written. 20 days after the flood, the government installed the Delta Commission, and at that table, finally vindicated, sat Johan van Veen, Dr. Cassandra himself, with the plans he had been drafting while nobody listened. The logic was radical. Stop endlessly raising hundreds of kilometers of vulnerable dikes. Slam the door instead. Dam the sea inlets themselves and shorten the coastline by hundreds of kilometers. It took more than 40 years. Dams, sluices, barriers, built in open water, with techniques that had to be invented along the way. And when fishermen and a young environmental movement revolted against killing the Eastern Schelt's tidal life, the Dutch attempted something even harder. A storm surge barrier 9 kilometers long that stays open, letting the tide breathe through 62 gates, and closes only when the sea turns hostile. When Queen Beatrix opened it in 1986, her words entered national memory. The Delta works are complete. Zeeland is safe. The finishing touch came in 1997, the Maislandkering, 2 swinging arms, each the size of the Eiffel Tower, guarding the gateway to Rotterdam. And the standard behind it all is almost arrogant. The heart of Holland is now defended against a storm so rare it should occur once every 10,000 years. The American Society of Civil Engineers put the result on its list of the 7 wonders of the modern world. So, is that the happy ending? Not quite. There are 3 twists. Twist 1. The sea is rising. The Delta works were engineered for the 20th century's ocean. Dutch planners are now seriously studying scenarios of multiple meters of sea level rise, and quietly admitting that at some point, raise the dikes stops being a complete answer. The war isn't won. It's paused. Twist 2. The Dutch are building downward anyway. Right now, plans are moving ahead for a brand new town in the Zuidplaspolder, the deepest polder in the country, nearly 7 meters below sea level. Critics call it madness. Supporters call it confidence. Either way, it tells you how completely the fear of 1953 has faded. Twist 3. The disaster became an export product. After Hurricane Katrina drowned New Orleans, the Americans called the Dutch. After Sandy flooded New York, Dutch designers helped rethink the waterfront, and the Netherlands appointed the world's first official water ambassador. The country that nearly drowned now sells survival to everyone else. In the end, the Watersnoodramp isn't really a story about a storm. It's a story about what a country chooses to ignore, and what it becomes when it finally stops ignoring it. The Dutch needed 1,836 deaths before they listened to their own engineers. Then they built the most ambitious flood defense in human history on a foundation of grief. And I will tell you all about it in the next video. Thank you for watching.